Went to a chick's house at 2 a.m. after the bar. She made me a drink and told me she was going to shower. After sipping on the drink for a few minutes, I realized I was getting tired really fast. I was drunk, but not like that. I stumbled up and tried to get my shoes on while bouncing off the walls a little. She came out from down the hall still wearing her clothes and still dry hair, and I can hear the shower running, as if she was waiting for me to pass out. She asked WTF I was doing, and I just said, "I'm getting the fuck out of here." I ran down the street feeling like I could collapse at any minute. I had no idea I was so paranoid about any headlights I saw. I ended up hiding under a very low-lying pine tree and slept there all night long. I had a final destination moment when I was little. I lived in a 4-story building when I was little. On the second floor, the glass on the entrance door of our building was broken. Drunks threw something at it couple of night prior, and only the top part of the glass was left hanging in the doorframe, like a larger shard. Also relevant to the story is that I used to compete with myself how many stairs I can jump over at once, usually like 8 or 9 using a handrail. But the entrance door was at the bottom of 5 stairs, no handrail. That was relatively easy for me to jump over. Anyway, that day, Mommy and me wanted to go for a walk, and I jumped stairs, standard practice, and I got to the stairs of the entrance door and jumped. But my right ankle slid a bit and my balance was disrupted. I went head first to the hole in the entrance door where once glass was, and held myself with both hands on the frame. The remaining shards of glass started to shake due to my fall and vibrations, and I was about to be guillotined right at the neck, but didn't realize. I looked back to Mommy, who stood frozen at the top of the stairs, and I started to laugh, 'cause I fell, but I didn't know that the shard is about to fall. I removed my head from the door frame 'cause she was acting strange, and you guessed it, one shard fell. But here I am 30 years later writing this. I cheated death, and it has yet to haunt me. I live in Wisconsin, not far from a town called St. Nazons. In that town, in an abandoned school called JFK Prep. It was once a seminary school that was later used as a Catholic high school, but shut down at some point. Since then, an urban legend has grown around it that claims it's haunted. Growing up, you'd hear stories about abuse, torture, and strange deaths. Also, the founder is said to haunt the grounds. He actually is buried on the grounds with a number of other former people. As always, the stories are more interesting than the truth. There were 2 real deaths there, though. One girl hung herself in her room. Later, a groundskeeper was accidentally electrocuted. Also, one kid did impale himself on the grounds. He was climbing the flagpole and it snapped. With him falling on it, he survived though. Anyway, about 10 or so years ago, the owner at the time was putting on a haunted house in one of the buildings that wasn't dilapidated. My friends got a hold of some ghost hunters organization in the Midwest, and they convinced the owner to let us do an overnight investigation. This basically meant we walked through all the buildings on a guided tour, asking questions to the air while taping with a recorder. EVP stuff. To my knowledge, this did not yield any results. It was definitely creepy walking around some areas. I remember the shower room was especially weird and kind of hard to explain. It was one big room with 2 sides of showers and a walkway in between. So you'd be facing the other shower area while taking your shower, only with a wall separating you. But that walkway had like viewports into the showers, so if you're walking down it, you can look it on the people showering. It was weird. I remember walking through the tunnels that connected each building. We had flashlights, but we would turn them off occasionally to take pictures. I remembered taking a few steps and stopping. When I turned my light back on, I was right on the precipice of a 15-foot drop-off. That was probably the scariest thing that happened to me, except for maybe when we went to the room where the girl hung herself. The two ghost hunters and I decided to sit in her room for a while, asking questions and recording any answers. They set up motion detectors in the hallway that were only set to go off if something broke the beam for several seconds. This was to avoid birds or bats setting them off. We also placed them around 4 or 5 feet up so small animals wouldn't set them off. I sat next to the doorway with my back resting on the door jamb. So we're in the room for almost an hour. It's 2 or 3 in the morning in late October. It was raining earlier, so it was cold and damp. We were seemingly getting nothing, and we were all ready to call it quits. So we all agreed to give it another 15 minutes and leave. 15 minutes go by and one of the guys says, "Okay, let's go." It was immediately after that the motion detectors go off. We're all sitting down and staring at each other, kind of frozen with shock. Remember, I'm sitting next to the open doorway with my back to the hallway. It took us about 30 seconds to realize we're being stupid, and if something is there, we should be looking for it. We didn't see anything, and we did look. I'm actually not a believer in ghosts, and so I expect there is a reasonable explanation for what set off the alarms, but it still freaked the hell out of me when it happened. It was all good fun. Kids used to sneak into the buildings at night. Obviously, it was illegal, and sometimes they'd get busted and fined. So it was definitely cool to get to go there legally and explore with impunity. Also, we got to walk through the haunted house for free and jump out and scare people. It was actually probably the best Halloween I've ever had as an adult. I was driving with my friend at about 1 a.m. and we stopped at a red light. On the corner, we saw a woman who appeared to be in her 60s, with some kind of black liquid dripping out of her mouth. Under the street light, it looked black, but it for sure could have been red. She was smiling and made eye contact with me, and then started walking straight toward my car. Never once broke eye contact. Never stopped smiling. Then a man about the same age came right for the passenger side door. She went for the driver's side, and I just hit the gas and ran the red light. At that point, she had almost grabbed the door handle, so I didn't really care if she was a little bit in the way of the car. I dropped my friend off after we had processed what happened, walked her inside to be safe. Then when I went back to my car, I heard a man yelling, "Sir," down the street and absolutely sprinting full force towards me. I ran back to my friend's door while being chased by him about 50 feet behind me. I just hung out in my friend's living room for a few more hours until no one was outside. In terms of terrifying and depressing true crime, a friend of mine from elementary's mom was stabbed to death by his sister's boyfriend. One of my older cousins was at a party with his girlfriend when a young boy at the party found a shotgun in the house. He didn't know it was loaded and blew my cousin's girlfriend's fucking head off playing around with it like a fucking idiot. I shivered just imagining the thought of having a good time at a party and then seeing that in terms of stories and supernatural stuff. Another elementary school friend's brother said his grandpa told him a story where he met some creepy, demonic living dollish girl. She looked like Chucky in his barn late at night and talked with her. I'm pretty sure he was just trying to scare us, but it was unnerving nonetheless. The usual Bloody Mary and Hookman urban legends went around my school. Of course, from what I remember, there were people at my school who thought the creeper from Jeepers Creepers was real and claimed to have seen him. I remember hearing a friend tell a very disturbing story about some man apparently with a head made of crumpled up paper doing some weird wobbly dancing like movements across the railroad tracks. My grandparents have a pretty large property where the backyard is big and forest-wide, but becomes marshland and eventually a large river. They have a dock with a lookout stand on it, and there are many animals that go through the property like deer, snakes, raccoons, bobcats, even a gator once. My friend stayed the night with me there one summer when I was 13, and we decided to be silly and go into the woods at midnight with a flashlight. I walked a few paces behind her and threw pine cones in the distance to freak her out, and she got scared. There was a critter nearby, so we were laughing and having fun, being scared, and ran to the lookout stand. I threw a couple more pine cones when her back was turned, and she finally caught me, and we were laughing. The flashlight dies. That was spooky, but we were silly and younger and didn't care. But then we hear more cracking twigs and rustling in the marsh grass. She immediately turned to me to stop throwing things, but I was out of pine cones, and we were just staring at each other as we could hear a big something crunching around the woods. We finally took off and ran to the house in the dark. Losing my mind one night that felt physically and mentally in purgatory. Then the months that followed were hell. I smoked what I thought was weed, but was probably something else from someone's first mistake. Then wasn't in the best state of mind, and everything spiraled for about 2 to 3 hours. The people I was with I couldn't trust anymore, and during that trip I literally lost my mind, thinking that everything and everyone I knew was all a joke and lie that I fell for. After that I just wanted to isolate and try to be normal again. Didn't exactly work, as I was constantly depressed, and anxiety was through the roof almost every day for months, thinking about that night, and I thought smoking from my own stuff would help, but ended up making things worse that I didn't know yet. I could barely eat, not only because of my anxiety and depression, but financially I was not doing well and didn't want to ask for help. I felt like I lost my privacy as I kept a lot of things to myself. But every time I thought of something or looked up something on my phone, it would be brought up around me and talked about, and it didn't sit right with me, whether it be at work or around family or friends. The last 2 times I smoked with literal hell, as my mind was in a constant loop that I couldn't get out of till the high wore off and I stopped. Smoking right there, but in all honesty, was literal insanity. So anyone reading this, just know some substances are not for everyone. I hallucinated a couple of times during those months and went through episodes of psychosis and didn't know when it was going to stop. Of course, it was my state of mind and what I was thinking that led me to it. but actually experiencing it I wouldn't wish upon anyone. I thought to myself, it isn't about me, and this isn't happening, and then it's all about you played on the radio were any scenario or thoughts I had felt like it was being put on by songs and made it so much worse and sent me spiraling. I could barely talk to anyone 'cause I know if I spoke to anyone about what I was going through it would have just been you're crazy, and it would have spread like wildfire. It took me so long to go back to normal, and I left my job and couldn't find anything for a while. Lost a lot of weight, then gained it back, and I cut off a lot of people in my life. This was about 5 months of going through this all fairly recently. Again, if anyone is going through something, please get the help you need or talk to someone professional. Understand that some people in your life you don't need, and really try to pick your friends wisely. Like any relationship, nothing changes if nothing changes. So please be careful out there, people, and just know things do get better with time, but it's different for everyone. A lot of choices will come back to reward you or haunt you, and time will only dictate how it turns out. Be safe. When I was walking home with my sis and my sister's boyfriend, we saw a glimpse of a man standing looking at his phone. We didn't really pay attention, and we went to our elevator to get to our floor. The man walked into the elevator with us and pressed the 3rd floor, while my sis pressed the 2nd floor. We got to the floor and got into our apartment. My sister and her boyfriend looked at each other and said, "Did that guy just get off on our floor?" I went outside and saw that he was just standing there looking at his phone. I pretended like nothing happened and went back inside. We were there for like 2 minutes when I see the door handle wiggle as if someone is trying to get in. When my sister's boyfriend went outside, the man left, like if he ran away. I said maybe he just got off the wrong floor or was looking for an apartment. But if he were, why did he wait until we went in the elevator for him to start going up? Also, my sister said that when we were in the elevator, we was on the texting app, but wasn't texting at all. She also said that he was staring at her and looked away. It was weird. There is an old legend about our churches that no one anymore knows really, and I read that in local history book. There was this nobleman in the 17th century who financed building of 3 churches. The legend tells he murdered his wife, family, and asked for God's forgiveness. God told him to build 3 churches, making this triangle shape, but he needed to crawl between the distance to each church until God would tell him to stop. So he crawled until his knees and hands were bleeding, and he died before given forgiveness. Back to modern time, there was a rumor about abandoned train stop where Satanist group hold their ceremonies. Real life stuff also, like murders. My distant relative was killed in the daylight at the marketplace in the 90s before I was born. Throat cut open, and historic places related to Civil War mass grave and prison camp.